It's nice to have you on today. As Mo has said, I'm Eugene Adebayo Ajayi, and I lead the House of Lights Missions. It's a mission to men, women, families, Christians in the marketplace, Christians everywhere. And I seek to always help to have these sort of conversations that can help us think deeply about how God designed things to be originally. So this is Spirit-Filled Marriages, and we're looking at the topic of communication. Communication is the bedrock of marriage, not even love. You know, love is taken for granted that we ought to love one another, and I believe that most couples who come together have the best of intentions. They do want to work together. They do want things to work. No one's going to invest that much money, that much time, that much emotions, and not want things to work. So when relationships fail, why do they fail? They often fail around the issue of communication. And last week was fantastic. There were quite a few ideas that came up and that were shared, and questions that were asked that shows that people are engaging. So we're going to look deeper into some other areas that can help us understand the best way to communicate. So I'm going to start from proposition. Of course, like we've said, proposition just is looking at ways in which we can solve the problems that we encounter, you know, on the subjects that we're discussing. Now, in a marriage, one of the big issues in marriage is to understand the context of our conversation. So if you don't understand the context, you are likely to confuse your communication. And here's what I mean. I said last week that both the husband and wife will play different roles in the marriage institution. So for instance, the man is a father, and he's a husband, he's a leader, a spiritual leader, and a few other things in the home. And when he's communicating with his wife, if the context is not defined, so let's say speaking to the wife as a husband who is the leader and the strategist in the home, and the wife is thinking that her lover is speaking to her. At that point in time, communication can become confused. But one way in which I've been able to help couples to understand their communication from a very base point is to understand the purpose of the home, the purpose of the marriage. Everything that a couple does must flow out of a very deep and clear understanding of purpose. Now, in the place where there's no deep and clear understanding, the conversations should be to come to a point of agreement, a point of definition, and a point of agreement concerning purpose. Because if you understand the purpose of your marriage, everything else will fall into place. If you know why you're where you are and what you're supposed to be doing and why you're supposed to be doing it, then communication becomes easy. But very often what happens is that the man is in a marriage for a different purpose, whilst the woman is in a marriage for a totally different purpose. So the man may be there because, well, mommy always said you need to get married. The wife may be there because she thinks, okay, well, I need a man to take care of me. You know, a man may be there because he just wants children, because his grandmother said that she needs a child. You know, different things. People are in the marriage for different reasons. Now, once there are two different reasons or purposes that both man and woman are plotting, it's a perfect example of what you call division, or what you call division. So it's important that a man and a wife must understand purpose. Everything about a marriage must center around purpose. You've heard me say, don't marry for love, marry for purpose. Love is taken for granted. You're supposed to be a love being anyway. But purpose is the reason why God has allowed you to be together. Now, if you understand the purpose, which is the big picture objective, that's the reason why God has brought you together. That's the outcome you need to work towards. Then the second point you want to talk about, that you want to have a clear understanding of, is strategy. So your first discussion, your first communication should be about understanding purpose and why you are, the what, the whys, and the hows, you know, and the who's in the picture. The strategy is to then look at all of the different things that you need to accomplish. And part of that is also having a strategy for communication. Now, we said earlier that communication is a trade of thoughts, intents, and ideas. And you must have a way in which you can always communicate what is most valuable. You know, all the things that you need to communicate, the most valuable aspects of your interaction, you must be able to communicate it without issues. So there must be a clear, understood, and agreed strategy of communication. Okay? When we need to discuss about all the different areas, for instance, in a typical home, you want to discuss about how do you fulfill your spiritual responsibilities. Secondly, how do you fulfill your parental responsibilities? How do you fulfill your career responsibilities? How do you fulfill your social responsibilities? There must be a way in which you discuss those things. Some families, what they will do is that they have different days for different discussions. And I tried that once with my wife. You know, that so we have a day in which we discuss the ministry. They'll have a day in which we discuss business, other things that we do. We have another day in which we discuss things that have to do with the home, and have a day that we just chillax. You know, so you must have a strategy of communication. If you don't have a defined, agreed strategy, what just happens? You're going to just roll with your feelings, and that may not be very helpful for you. Number 3 thing I want to talk about that can help the way we conversate and the way we manage communication is that there must be a conflict management strategy. First thing you have to realize that there will be conflict. So don't deceive yourself to think that you can never have a marriage where there's not going to be conflict. If both of you are mature individuals who have an identity, who have a brain, there will be conflict because you are not likely to start looking at the same issues from the same point. It's not likely. So understand that there will be conflict. Now, conflict doesn't mean you're fighting. There's bad conflict and there's good conflict. Bad conflict is when conflict has become unmanaged to a point where it has become combustible, where it has become about maybe name calling and personal attacks and stuff like that. So, but conflict is really how to manage a difference in opinion. And what would help you manage the difference in opinion are 2 things: understanding of the purpose, understanding of the roles, and having a strategy to manage conflict. Now, strategy will be, well, any point in time where we're discussing and we are seeming not to agree, a strategy could be both of you agreeing that you will have to then stop and ask yourself the question, what is this conversation really about? Because it's possible for a couple to be having a conversation and in both your minds, you're talking about 2 different things in having that conversation. You know, so I'll give you an instance. Well, this is a funny one. It's not about a couple. A friend of mine came over to the US and he was sharing with some people, and he told them he's from Nigeria, so he was telling them that they had to take drugs when he was back in Nigeria. Now in the US, when you use the word drugs, and probably in the UK also, drugs means you're taking class A drugs. So everybody had a look of shock on their face, you know. And then I was joking with him. I said, well, you could have made it worse by telling them that, well, and you see, when I was going to use those drugs, I had to use it with Coke, you know. And of course, we know in Nigeria, Coke means Coca-Cola, you know. And that's how 2 people can have a conversation, and one person knows exactly what he's talking about. He's talking about using its medicine and using it with, so let's say it's using it with what they call soda here in maybe in the West. Then he and the other person is thinking he's using class A drugs, and you know that the guy is just a drug user. And that can happen in a home. So the fact that we are using the same English words, you know, or native words doesn't mean you are saying exactly the same thing. So in conflict management, one of the first things that you want to do when you see that things are escalating is to pin it down and to ask yourself, what really is this about? Because in one conversation, you can be hitting different things. So it's possible in a particular conversation where maybe the man is trying to drive home a principle, you know, but then the woman may be seeing something personal in the principle. So, so let's say a husband comes home and says, did you call Esther today? And the wife says, no, I didn't call her. And he says, well, I think you should call her because, you know, she needs to go and pick up her check. Okay. And the lady says, oh, but I don't think I need to call her. You know, by the way, the last time I spoke to her, she didn't greet me properly, you know. And the husband says, well, that shouldn't matter. It's very important for her to pick her check. And then at that point, one says, well, it seems you don't care about my feelings because I told you that she didn't greet me properly, so you want her to insult me, you know, and that can happen. But the man is thinking, oh, in principle, well, I get the fact that maybe she didn't greet you properly and you're offended at that. There may be reasons, but right now, maybe there's a deadline. She needs to go and pick up her check. But the woman is thinking, well, you are more or less saying that I should, keep speaking to a woman who disrespects me. So you can see how that simple situation I just described now can become a very, very big issue. So it's always good to see when it's escalated to say, hey, okay, so what is this really about? All right, then say, okay, well, so there's the issue of calling Esther and make sure she gets the check because she might lose the opportunity. And also there's the issue of the wife giving the husband information that she felt slighted by the same woman. So there are two different issues being brought into one conversation. So that's part of a conflict management strategy. So one, maybe pinpoint what the real issues are and separate them so that you can pick them one by one in order. So in that particular case, the husband can say, okay, well, I'm going to hear you out first. Tell me a bit about what Esther did. And you talk about that. I thought, well, we need to sort Esther out. And then both of you can then agree on how to then inform Esther about her check, and then maybe speak to her afterwards about maybe relation between yourself and maybe the man and the woman and her friend. So stuff like that is important, that you have a conflict management strategy to look ahead at what sort of conflict can ensure, why that conflict erupts, and how to manage it so that it never escalates. Conflict is actually a good thing because conflict often precedes agreement. You understand? So conflict means that you're recognizing each other's different positions. Conflict is like recognizing what your postcode is. So if I want you to come to my house in Aylesbury, my postcode is HP21. So let's say you stay in Northwest London, your postcode is not Northwest. So conflict is you realizing that you are in Northwest and I'm speaking to someone who is in the Southeast, and both of you need to locate where you are so that you can come to HP 21 something. So conflict is actually recognizing your position, but not staying there. So wisdom in conflict management means that you understand what your positions are and you're willing to move away from them. But what we often do when we have conflict is that we just defend our position, forgetting that we're traveling somewhere together. And purpose is that end point you're traveling to. So that's why I said earlier that without the understanding of purpose, everything else is messed up in marriage. Purpose is that end point you're traveling together. It must be agreed. You must know that you're going to the same place. That's the reason why you're going to be able to endure certain things. That's the reason why you're going to be able to put up with the pressures and the challenges of change and transformation that come in marriage. So, well, that's a little bit of conflict management. And another strategy could be you agree on how to disagree. So, well, let's say whatever happens, it escalates to the point where the smoke coming out of your nose and your ears, you have to have policies. Part of the policies myself and wife put in place is this, that no matter what happens, whenever the other party says, let's sit down, let's talk about this, that we will, both parties must sit down to talk. And when you do talk, you're going to be very objective and not be pushing your feelings and your emotions. You're going to be looking at the issue objectively and discussing. I would also then still flesh out how that will happen. And sometimes if it comes to a point where you can't solve the problem, you must have people who can arbitrate. So there must be an arbitration strategy. So in any case, so that's that, and trying to, So then also another thing to think about is using the right method of communication. Now, what this speaks about is the different tools of communication we have. So largely your body is it's what you use. So your body, you can either use your tongue and your lips to form words. You can use your voice to communicate tone. You can use your body also to communicate information. You must use your whole system, your whole body, to communicate. And you must understand when, you must understand how. So there's certain things that may be better to discuss after work. If you discuss it before work, when the man or the woman's mind is filled with what they have to do, it may not be the best time. So you always have to think about the method of communication. There's some communication that is not good to do on WhatsApp. So WhatsApp is a method of communication. Text is a method of communication. There's certain things that is just better to do by voice. You're likely to miscommunicate when you use text. It's better to talk voice. But there's some things are better said face to face. So you need to be savvy about these things. You need to know how your friends, how your spouse receives communication and how they interpret communication. And you have to be a master at knowing what tools to use. Another thing that you also want to think about is there must be a method of review and feedback. That means you don't just talk. Now, I see this happen a lot. More often a lady feels heard when she's vented her emotions. Some men do that also. So for most of us, talking and speaking is talking, but that is not communication. I actually think that both men and women should find other spaces to vent, maybe to maybe a pastoral person or stuff, or their friends, or if possible, it is safe, so that when you're talking to your spouses, you are having a reasonable conversation. So, and whenever you're speaking to the person, you actually are speaking with a view to seek the person's understanding, to see the person's viewpoint, and to get an agreement. If that is the purpose of a conversation, then you will have to be thinking about how to get a review and how to get feedback. So you're always seeking feedback, and that feedback is to see if there's any understanding from that other person's part. If you need to shift your own position and move forward, if there's a trackable point that both of you need to move towards an agreement and stuff like that. And feedback is not only verbal feedback. You have to be able to read emotional feedback. You have to be able to read body language feedback and many other things. It's all part of communication. And then the other bit I wanted us to also think about was context and roles, because that determines the kind of communication that you use. And in that time, you must, whenever you're speaking, always understand what you're speaking as, and how your spouse is listening. Like I said earlier, if you are speaking as lovers are just really interested about the fun things, and they want to show each other how much they love one another, and so on and so forth. And maybe your husband then switches from lover, to father, or the lover switches to mother, and then maybe having a discussion about your children. You must know when the context and the roles are switching. And so, but after a while, you get so used to it that when it switches, you're automatically switching with it. But I'm just saying it must be in your mind, and so that lets you know that what is allowable in one context and role is not allowable in the other. You understand what I mean? So if you're living as lovers and you're now then talking as father and mother, it demands a level of seriousness. If you are talking as husband and wife, it's another kind of paradigm that suits her. For instance, you find out in most homes, what causes problem is people not understanding the context of husband and wife. Lovers, everybody gets lovers. Everybody knows what lovers should do. Everybody kind of gets mother and father, because most of that also is instinctive. The father often comes, with a voice of authority, and want to be a legacy. The mother comes with a voice of nurture and an influence. The father-mother thing, to a large extent, is instinctive, even though it can be better when a couple understands, how they are. But where most couples fail is in the interpretation of the role of husband and wife. That interpretation, because of our fallen nature, we don't get it. So we always default back to Adamic nature. As much as we like to see ourselves as, new creature in Christ Jesus, and we are walking in the fullness, of that understanding, but we are not there yet. So you still find that a lot of men, still deal battle with insecurities. A lot of women battle with insecurities. A lot of women don't understand how the husband's role is, because nobody has taught them. They've not seen it done. Everybody just going with their feelings and their emotions. So it's within the husband and wife context that most of the problems in marriage occurs. Not as father and mother, because if you get the husband and wife right, you will get everything else, the lovers, the father, and so on and so forth. And also as spiritual resources to yourself in the home. You have to understand that sometimes your wife can speak into your life as also a child of God and a child of Zion, but that is different from her role as as husband and wife. So many times people miss that. So I've seen wives that can say, well, but I'm very good in my workplace, I'm a very good administrator, and in my church I prophesy. Why can't he listen to me? The roles are different in the home. So I would want to push to you guys on this call to start thinking very deeply about context and roles when you speak. Now, for instance, when you're speaking as husband and wife, which more or less encompasses most of these other roles, you really need to understand how that role play functions when someone's wife and she needs a husband. How do you relate when someone's husband and needs a wife? How do you relate in that context? How do you then plug into the father-mother role? How do you plug into the lover role? How do you plug into the friend role? How do you plug into any other work that you do? For instance, it's possible for you guys to do business together. And then what you are as business partners. But it's very easy. Let's say you're discussing as business partners, and then let's say, for instance, maybe husband and just finished playing a role of husband and wife, and husband is Lord and Master, and then you are then having a conversation about business. And let's say your wife is an accountant, and you maybe your background is marketing. I like to use accountants and marketing examples a lot because I know they often tend to fight. So and you have a big idea for your business, and your wife says, "Sweetheart, based on my calculations, I don't think that will work." And she's talking from a professional capacity that you can verify that she knows what she's talking about, then you need to listen. But you can't then come into the husband role at that point in time and say, "Hey, you have to do what I told you to do." You need to understand how those things work. But that's why I said, if in that particular situation, the husband and wife context is not well understood or well managed, it will affect every other role that you play. So if you've not managed the husband and wife role better, you're going to struggle as father, mother, you're going to struggle as lovers, you're going to struggle as business partners. So it's very important that the husband and wife role is well understood, and it's understood in the light of a godly purpose. You can't just have it in isolation. You have to plot back into purpose. So I hope that is making sense. So some of the skills that you need to learn to make communication work are the following. Listening. You need to know how to listen. Listening doesn't just involve being able to understand the words that are spoken in English. It's being able to understand the context, understand the person, understand the direction things are going, understand the different things the person is saying in one line of communication. Typically, when someone says something to you, it contains different elements. It contains logos, which is the words, which is the logic that is coming out. It contains ethos, which is the ethics. What's the values, the baseline value around this word this person communicates. It contains the pathos, which is the emotions. That's there. So those are just three things that you can see in someone's communication. So you have to be able to listen to the person, not just the words. Listen to the person, not just the words. Listen and hear the person. If both of you can hear one another, then you can understand one another, you can communicate better. Then negotiation. A big part of communication is negotiation. Negotiation is really about seeing a point of agreement and keep trading thoughts and ideas until you find an agreeable point of agreement. But of course, in this case, I advise that it's according to purpose. So that means whatever negotiation or agreements you come into, you must be having the end point in mind. So it's like you coming from Southeast and one person coming from Northwest and going to HP to then decide, okay, what route should we take? What train should we take? So that we can meet at a point where we can travel together, or we are traveling and want to meet at the same point, which is in maybe HP 21 in Aylesbury. Then you have to then negotiate and say, okay, well, should we use Central Line? No, let's use Metropolitan Line. Okay, but Metropolitan Line is they're having a strike today. All right, maybe we'll use the bus. Oh, but the bus, it will take a longer time. All right, let's take Uber then. Okay, so negotiation is just really reasoning with each other, not for the advantage of having your own needs met particularly, or having your own points established, but you're working towards a common goal. So negotiation must be towards a common goal. So for instance, I know for this whole Brexit issue, Brexit is going to need a lot of negotiators, to be talking about to Europe about what will be in the best interest of all concerned. So there has to be negotiation on both sides. Now, what you then need to be careful of is the purpose of negotiation must not be to get your own way. Once you negotiate to get your own way, you're actually practicing witchcraft. So the purpose of negotiation must be for the good for God, for according to God's will, for the good of for the home and for the good of the other person. Note, I said for God's will to be done, for the good of the home and for the good of the other person. So never put yourself first. Once you put yourself first, you destroy everything. Okay? So part of the skills also must be arbitration. You must know how to seek arbitration, get the right people involved if you find out there's a need to de-escalate a situation that's getting out of hand. Don't just keep it in there and be simmering. Some people say, well, it's better not to talk to anyone, it's just myself and you. But sometimes you don't have the skills to sort these things out. So from get-go, I always emphasize that couples must have, before they even marry, people they can go to, wise counsel that can look at the issue, look at the persons involved, look at your purpose, and help you to find your way out, of a trench. And then we're talking about reviewing and feedback skills. You need to know how to get review. And sometimes when you're dealing with your spouse, you can think, for instance, a lot of ladies think that guys are just like women. You're in touch with our feelings. Most guys, we have feelings, but we're not that much in touch with them. So you may have to be someone who knows what questions to ask to get a guy to talk. So you can't just say, Also, tell me what your day was like. Most guys will say fine. There's some ladies that will say fine too. My wife is like that. She's said and said fine. It was very strange to me. I thought the guys were the ones that said fine when you asked them about the day. But there was my wife also, and who, she just didn't really, wasn't that sort of person who talked, a lot about her day. So reviewing, you need to find the best way, to review your spouse's understanding. So for some person, maybe immediate feedback like, okay, do you understand what I just said? For another person, you may need to give them time to think about it and then find ways, maybe over the day or over the week, depending on who your spouse is, to find how they're digesting information you give them, if they need to clarify. You understand? So you just find a way to ask your different questions. That all of that is in practice. Since I don't know your specific situation, I may not be able to give specific answers, and also the fifth is the skills that you also need to employ is how to garner information. Is that it's not everything you need to know that your spouse can tell you, because it's not everything they're going through that they may be able to be aware of or can articulate. So you just have to keep your eyes open to see what the other person is thinking, what's going on in their minds, so you need to be able to garner information. You need to be able to draw information. You need to be listening. You need to have your eyes open. And the whole purpose of that is not just so that you can have a happy marriage. It's so that you can have agreement on issues that matter. Because your agreement, as was shown earlier, is that conversations brings agreement, agreement brings unity, unity births purpose. So when God said to man that he will leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife, and the two shall become one flesh, what God had in mind was unity of purpose and action. So your communication is to come to a point where you agree on the things that God thinks is important about your family in all the different areas, in the way you relate to one another, in the way you parent, in the way you set up your home, in what your home does, in the things that you guys invest your time on your labor in. You must come into agreement, because two cannot work together except they agree. So it means you must be listening with your spirit, you must be listening with your soul, you must be listening with your body. Okay? And it's quite important that you get those three right, because often we're only listening on two levels. We're always listening body and what our body needs. Your body needs food, your body needs sex, your body needs this, and you're listening to our soul. Our soul needs affection, our soul needs attention, our soul needs validation, but often we're not listening to the spirit, which is purpose. So it's important that both the husband and wife can relate on the three levels in the right order. So there must be a spirit, soul, body interaction rather than a body, soul, spirit interaction. Most of our relationships start from body, soul to spirit. So it means that it's always about my body needs, then my soul needs, and many times we forget the spirit. Whereas it should start from spirit. Now, I don't mean spirit in the sense that you just come every single day you're praying for 5 hours a day. That's not what I mean. When you talk about spirit, you're talking really about the core of your person and your purpose and what God wants to do. So God being the center of your life perspective and interaction and identity. That's what I mean. So when I talk spirit, I'm meaning the core principles upon which your life is laid. You understand? Of course, if God is at the center of it, it's going to change the way you guys approach God. So for instance, understanding that can then lead you guys to into ways to have your devotions together, to seek God's face so that you understand his will. But everything that you do in marriage must be based on spiritual principles. Okay, because if you don't build around spiritual principles, you're going to build on soulish principles. And a lot of marriage stuff out there are built around soulish principles and body principles. So for instance, if we talk about the issue of communication, people who are building around body principles will talk a lot about sex and how you are having sex and this and that and so on and so forth. People who are building around the soul principles, the only thing they're going to talk about is 5 love languages and this and that. Now, all of those things give us an understanding of where we're coming from. It gives us an understanding of the issues that we're dealing with, but that's not the end point. From a spirit-based perspective, you're looking at what is God's mindset for me and this wife. Why is God allowing us to come together? What is the best that God could do in this home? Of course, we're not there yet, but the idea is to have an end point in mind that we are working towards. Now, when a couple has that sort of thing in mind, you will enjoy your marriage. In fact, you're going to feel as if there's not too much time on this earth to fulfill your purpose, because you've already defined this great and exciting end point that God has defined. So that's the first thing. That should govern every other thing you do in life. Otherwise, if that doesn't govern it, they are going to govern it from your soul. And your soul, is a totally different place. The soul of the man, the soul of the woman is different. Your needs are different. And some people, their whole marriage is centered around meeting the needs of their soul. So they are not spiritually productive. They are not the family that God can come into, like Abraham's family, and say, well, I know he will command his family to follow him, because the women are not even listening and the men are not listening. Anyway, so I'm not saying that soul needs are not important. I'm not saying body needs are not important, but I'm saying they must be built around, on understanding of spiritual principles, and the marriage that is built around spiritual principles will fulfill those things anyway, but in a different way. So, for instance, there are times that in obeying the spiritual principle, your souls may not like the idea of what you're going to have to do. So, let's say, for instance, God speaks to two couples and say, well, both of you have the opportunity to work in the best companies in the land right now, but I do want you guys to move into a place where there's some sort of deprivation. So move from central London to somewhere in the southeast, and I want you to live among those families. And I want you to take those kind of jobs that you normally have taken, but take them in a company that pays you less. Now, if that was what God was saying to you, your spirit will rejoice, but your soul will be sad. Because your soul can see that you're going to endure some deprivation. You're going to be around people who are not very nice, who are very nasty. So your soul is going to complain. And then your body may not think about it until your body gets there. It's when you get there for the first night and you find out that the mattress that you're sleeping on is not this HD memory foam. Then your body starts to complain. So you find out that sometimes in doing what is best, your soul and your body will complain. Now imagine if, let's say, the husband is hearing God from his spirit, but the wife is not plowing from the spirit. She's thinking about the comfort of the body, comfort of the soul. They will never come into agreement, and they're going to fight. And I've seen many homes break up like that because, the soul needs are not met, because the spiritual needs are not put first. So that's a very, very important skill to learn. I can't overflog that, but you can always ask questions later. And another thing that you also need to learn is body language. Your body communicates 70% of the things you say. So when you're in the room, your body language speaks a lot. People pick up subliminal suggestions from your body talks. So you need to train your body and use your body to express what your spirit and your soul really wants to say. Don't say, well, I don't know. That's just how I am. Don't just say that's how you are. Train your body, so that you're using your body to communicate what you want to say. There's no point you saying something, your tone is saying something different, and your body is saying something different. So there must be congruence, in your interaction. Unto him that this conversation that you show your salvation alone. Ordering your conversation means what your spirit is thinking, your soul is subservient to your spirit, and your body is subservient to your soul. So that what you're thinking in your spirit, or what God is thinking through you, is what is happening. Often what happens is our appetite is making our body do something, our emotions is making our body do something else, and your spirit is just left in the dark. So we must bring our body into subjection. And of course, you must watch your tone. So when someone says to you, well, that tone, I don't like it, you might say, I don't mean anything. Don't say that. Ask, what about my tone don't you like? How does it come across to you? And then start to learn to change your tone, your pitch, the volume of your words, the sequence of your words. Start to learn. People are important enough to God, at least, for you to mind the way you speak to them. So watch your words and watch the content. So you are the communication device. So communication is not the word you are speaking. Communication is what you are saying, what your whole life and your body is communicating. The Bible says, let your light so shine, that men may see and they give glory to God. They may see your good work. So you can see that you are God's communication device. Also in your home, that's where it starts from. You must be able to communicate God's intent deep in your spirit. So first of all, of course, your spirit must communicate to God. Your spirit must be able to communicate together with your spouse. But you must then bring your soul to a point where all those 5 components of your soul are subject to your spirit, and then your body then becomes subject to your soul. So it's very, very important. All these principles are important. But of course, there's just so much we can say on this webinar. I trust that the community of the Spirit-filled marriages are looking into bringing a retreat together where we can trash this out, and so that people can go away and learn and see how to practice this principle, because the goal is that we do want the marriages that God is raising this season, to reflect the kingdom of God in every way. And so there you are, and that's where we are at. at this point. I wonder if there are any questions, feedback before we pray.